So I'm going to make some predictions for some fighters we will see make the UFC in 2024. So a lot of these will be Australian, but I'm going to have two non-Australian prospects on here just to even it out a bit. But I do think there will be a lot of Australian fighters who do make the UFC next year. So without further ado, on to the first person who I think will make the UFC next year. Sorry about that. I'll turn my notifications off. I'm going to start with non-Australian prospects here, and this is someone who, I mean, you just got to be impressed with this guy. This guy's looking better and better every fight. Obviously, he's not undefeated now, but his one loss was to an injury. I'm talking about Lozine Keita. He's a very good fighter out of Belgium. 12 and 1. So many of them wins are by knockout. Like, this guy just knocks people the fuck out. I think he will be in the UFC by next year. Has a win over Ivan Buchinger. I can't really pronounce these foreign last names sometimes, but that's okay. But yeah, I do think Kaita will make the UFC sometime next year. He is just a really good prospect. He's powerful. 12 and 1. The UFC, I'm sure, already have their eyes on him because he is very hyped up. And I think next year will be the year. I think it's the best time to get him in there. How old is he? He's 25 years old. So yeah, I think next year is the best time to get him in there. And then this is a prospect I'm really excited on. He actually lost his last fight, but I'm going to have him on this list anyway because I'm talking about Saladin Panasi. I think that's how you pronounce it. He lost his last fight, but it was a decently competitive fight, and it's especially impressive that it was competitive when you factor in that his last fight was 2 weight classes up his natural weight. 2 weight classes. He didn't even get knocked out. He stuffed every takedown. He's a featherweight. He's a natural featherweight. And this guy went out there and had a competitive fight. Like, I mean, come on. That's all I have to say, right? Like, that has to sell him for you, right? He went up there and had a competitive fight with an undefeated massive welterweight, a former middleweight, when he's a natural featherweight. Like, that's just got to be all I got to tell you, right? Like, the guy is generally really impressive. He avenged his last loss before this, so he's 18 and 2, 26 years old. Like, the guy's young, only just turned 26. I think this guy will be in the UFC, and I think he can be a ranked featherweight. Now, I'm not saying he's going to go in there and be champion or anything crazy like that, but I do think we see him in the UFC next year. Maybe he's really enjoying the money he's making in KSW, so maybe that doesn't happen. But I think this guy's a UFC level talent, and I do think we will see this man in the UFC very, very soon. Now, moving on. We have an Australian prospect. He's out of Perth. I've made a few videos on this man, and every time I watch Steve Erceg fight and beat up David Dvorak, beat Costa in his fight, he's looking good, but like, I'm Jesus Christ, I'm making it sound like he's shit. Like, he's beating these guys. He's doing it pretty easily. I know he had a bit of trouble in the second round against Costa, but the man who's pushed him the most to the brick of defeat, and I know he does technically have a loss, but that was a very close fight, but is Cody Haddon. Cody Haddon is 5 and 1 as a professional, 5 and 0 as an amateur too, I believe. He's got a lot of experience, Cody Haddon. A massive amateur background, Muay Thai fights, Jiu-Jitsu credentials. This guy's really good. 25 years old, out of Perth, Western Australia. He's a bantamweight, powerful fighter, slick hands, good grappling, takedown defense is constantly improving, good cardio, good chin, and like I say, the guy's got some crazy power for a bantamweight, and he went in there a few years ago on short notice and had a competitive fight with Steve Erceg. Now he's improving more and more. I think he's going to be fighting in March against Sean Gauchi, who also admittedly could have been on this list. Sean Gauchi is also a really good fighter in his own right. So whoever wins that fight will probably go straight to Dana White Contender Series or maybe even the UFC. But both of these guys are amazing prospects. But Cody Haddon especially, super young, really good fighter, well-rounded. And yeah, I think we do see him. I did a short. So after this video, go check out my shorts. I did do a video on him with some of his highlights on there, so maybe go check that one out after this. But yeah, he's definitely a prospect to keep your eyes out. especially coming out of Perth. We're killing it right now in Perth. Jack Della Maddalena, ranked fighter. Steve Erceg, ranked fighter. We'll have Cody Haddon next. I'm not flipping the camera off, by the way. I have another finger up. Optical illusion, right? But yeah, we have Cody Haddon. We have Quillan Salkild coming up. Which, speaking of which, Quillan Salkild, 5-1 prospect out of Perth, Western Australia. He was the reason I have him on here with like a small record, like 5-1. I say small record, it's still a really decent record, but I have him on here with such limited experience because he was already booked for the road to UFC. He was already booked, so the UFC already have their eyes on him. He was already booked for a Zuffa branded, or I mean even a UFC branded event. I know it's technically not a UFC card, it's its own entity, but it still is a part of Zuffa, is a part of the UFC. It's got, road to UFC in the name. So, I think Quillan Salkild will be there, and I think he's generally a really good prospect. He's a really good fighter. Great cardio, good striker, Muay Thai background, has some really good counter boxing as well. He's really working on the striking, but as well his grappling's really good. He's got good he's got good submissions, good submission defense. One loss was against one of the best grapplers in the country, where he made a bit of a fatal mistake, but that was early into his pro career. A bit of a Jack Della Maddalena, loses your first pro fight. Obviously, he didn't lose his second pro fight or anything like that, but that's a typical Australian thing, losing your first fight or your second fight and then just going on a run. But he also has a great amateur background, beat Abdullah Baeda on the amateurs. So I generally think we see Quillan Salkild in the UFC. Like, the guy's got good wins, 7-1. Blake Donnelly is a really good win. Beat an American, Brett Pastore, in his last fight. And Pastore, on an amateur career, has he's fought previously the Ziri Lion. Oh my god, sorry, his name is... He just fought Slava Claus. Oh my god, sorry, this is very unprofessional. Nazim Zadikov, that's it. So, he fought Zadikov did beat Pastore, but I'm just saying, he's fought someone who's fought UFC level caliber fighters. Pastore also has a really extensive Muay Thai, Sambo background, has some wrestling background, and Quillan Salkild went out there and wrestle-fucked him. He went out there and destroyed him in the grappling. They say Australians can't wrestle, but Quillan Salkild is probably the best grappler. Well, I would generally say he's probably one of the best just pure wrestlers we have on the mixed martial arts scene. This guy's wrestling is really good. He has really good sprawls. His sprawling game is generally a legit sprawling game. This guy's fucking athletic as fuck as well. He's super young, just turned 24 today, so happy birthday to Quillan Salkild. But yeah, this guy's a really good prospect to keep your eyes on. He's got some power in his hands as well. He had a brutal KO over Blake Donnelly. So yeah, keep your eyes on him. He's fighting Don Marfan, who in his own right is a really good prospect, but Quillan Salkild's beat him before, and I generally think Quillan Salkild has probably improved even more than Don Marfan has since they fought last. So I guess we'll find out in February, but that should be a really good fight. Both are really good fighters in their own right, though. Don Marfan is a very good fighter. So if Quillan Salkild goes in there and, beats him 2-0, then, probably that's it. But maybe he'll want to be active, take another fight, build up some more experience, and then it's off to the races. Then another fighter I think will be in the UFC next year is Jonathan Mikhailov. He was actually the last fighter I did a shorts on. I did a prospect watch video on, and this guy's just really good. 5-1. Sorry, he's an amateur, but that one loss against Tom Ackerley, he should have won that clearly, in my opinion. I don't know how they didn't score it for him, but he should have won that in my own personal opinion. But again, I'm not a judge, but I did think he clearly edged that fight, especially on damage, but they didn't give it to him. But regardless, the guy's really good. Got plenty of amateur and pro experience, and he beat 8-1 Joseph Luciano in his last fight. Luciano's only loss is to current UFC fighter Carlos Prates, and instead of, Prates normally knocks people out, but Luciano made it to the final bell, and Mikhailov went in there and dominated him everywhere. His takedown defense is amazing. He has generally some really good takedown defense. He's a good grappler in his own right, good striking, amazing cardio. Like the guy's just really good. And he's only 24 years old, and he's a massive welterweight as well. The guy's fucking big for that weight class. I think he's got like a 75-inch reach or something like that. So he's got a long reach. He's very rangy. He's a kickboxer, but he's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, and honestly his grappling seems a bit better than his striking, but his striking is still very good. He's powerful. He's got a lot of head kick KOs. So yeah, this is a guy to keep your eye on. I reckon maybe he fights Matt Valley next on Hex or something like that, and then I reckon it's off to the races. Dana White Contender Series, some sort of UFC opportunity will definitely be there, because I've heard from a trusted source, Luciano won that fight. He was getting signed straight to the UFC. So, you got to imagine, same thing with Blake Donnelly versus Quillen Salkield. Blake Donnelly was probably on the radar, and then Quillen Salkield when it took that hype. So I could see the same thing happening here for Mikhailov. I could see him just taking that opportunity from Joseph Luciano, who is someone I think could still make the UFC. He's still a really good fighter. Like, Luciano has wins over some former UFC fighters on the amateurs. He beat Darian Weeks in the IMAFs. So that is still, he's still a very good fighter in his own right. Just speaks to how good Jonathan Mikhailov is. Then another fighter I think is almost destined to be on Dana White Contender Series or be just signed straight to the UFC is Abdullah Baeta. 9-1. Like, come on, the guy's 9-1. 28 years old, I believe, maybe 27. Really good fighter, also out of Perth, Western Australia. Perth is fucking absolutely killing it this year. We have so many good prospects coming out of this part of the country. And this isn't even a bias thing, like, because I'm from Perth. I'm not even being biased, but we generally just have a fucking explosion of talent coming out of this part of the country. Like, it generally is fucking absurd. But yeah, there is just a lot of really good prospects coming out of, like, I'm gonna be real with you guys. Perth is really fucking boring at times. All there is sometimes to do is just go and fucking scrap on with people. So some people just train because, there's a lot of junkies around some parts of Perth, and you got to always be prepared to be able to fucking throw them hands whenever you fucking have to. And that is a big reason why there are so many good prospects coming out of this part of the country. Obviously, Jack Della Maddalena, Steve Erceg, as I mentioned before. Jack Becker could probably still make the UFC, but maybe David Martinez stopped that from happening. But I don't know. Who knows? Jack Beck is still decently young. He could probably make the UFC eventually. But I think these are guys who I could definitely see making it next year. Who else is there? No. Oh, wait. Sorry. I got to talk more about Abdullah Baeta. So he's 6'3", 80-inch reach. I've heard, but I've also seen a minimum of 76 inches of reach. But he's a featherweight. This guy's fucking massive. He's of a Sudanese background, so he's very tall, very skinny, but very powerful, very rangy. He's got a very good kickboxing base. Trains out of a kick-ass MMA. His coach is actually a former UFC fighter, Stephen Kennedy. So he's training with a lot of good guys. I think it's mainly a Muay Thai gym. I might be wrong. Like, I think it's got a lot of Muay Thai fighters out of that gym. So, the guy's striking is legit. I don't even think he's been training that long. I think he started training martial arts and MMA in his 20s. So he's actually progressing very fast. His takedown defense is really good. And he actually beat a former Road to UFC fighter in his last fight, Park Ye-hun. And he fucking knocked him out. And he looked really good, looked patient, fought very smart. Yeah, he's just a guy to keep your eyes out for sure. Like, I generally do see him getting into the UFC, and I think he could actually do really well in that featherweight division, because he's not like a Sean Woodson where he's tall, but he's tall for nothing. He actually uses his range really well. Like, I don't know, the guy seems really good, and he's someone to definitely keep your eye on. I think he will make the UFC next year. Then moving on up, this is maybe a bit of a long shot one, but this guy's fighting for the Eternal Middleweight Championship in March. Ben Johnston. Now, he's only 4-1, I believe, so you're going to say that's not really the greatest record. And I do understand why people would say that, but his one loss was at a weight class he shouldn't have been. So yeah, he's 4-1. It was at a weight class he shouldn't have been fighting at. It was a welterweight fight, but this guy is massive. He's like 6'4". Like, this guy should never be fighting at welterweight. And it was against Caleb Rideout, who in his own right could maybe make the UFC next year if he does beat Alden Bates in February. I'll speak about Ben Johnston, then I'll get on to Caleb Rideout. Sorry. So Ben Johnston's 4-1, but you're gonna say why would I put him on this list? But he is training out of CKB, so that just that does make it a good chance that he does make the UFC. But this is just a long shot one that I'm putting on here. So if he beats John Martin Fraser, maybe. But to get onto Caleb Rideout, who I think has a really good shot of getting onto the UFC next year. He has a win over Kevin Doucette, and Kevin Doucette's looking fucking pretty good in the UFC right now. He went out there and destroyed Son Kanan, didn't get dropped or anything. And Caleb Rideout went out there, stuffed every takedown that he shot at him, beat him up on the feet. Like, Caleb Rideout is a really good fighter in his own right. And I think he beats Alden Bates probably when they do fight in February. So if he does get that fight done, it'll probably be a KO. And I would imagine he'll probably defend the belt maybe against a Kid Campbell or something like that. And then he'll probably be in the UFC. And this guy's just really fun, man. Like, this guy generally just fights crazy. He does some really unorthodox stuff. Punches to the thigh. Like, really, he punches to the thigh. He corkies your leg. Like, I don't know. He's really interesting. He has a really interesting style. A lot of spinning attacks. Very good. Very small for the welterweight division, but he's still very quick. He has good takedown defense. In his last fight, he did break his ankle, so he is coming off a loss, but he is fighting Alden Bates in February, and that should be a really good fight. And yeah, I think that's it for the video. So, oh, actually, Justin Van Heerden. I do have to include him on here. So unless him and Abdallah Bayeda fight next, I do think that they'll probably both make the UFC. Justin Van Heerden is a very good prospect. Trains out of Freestyle MMA. Really good improvements since training out of that gym. Yeah, the guy's just looking good. He's really developed on the feet. He has good jiu-jitsu. Very powerful as well. Got a really big knockout over Rod Costa his last fight. Like, the guy's just looking really improved. So yeah, it's definitely worth including Justin Van Heerden on this list. Yeah, training out of Freestyle MMA. So, trains with Volk. I hear a lot of good things about Justin Van Heerden at that gym as well. Like, he does do really well against a lot of the fighters. Like, I've heard some people tell me he's like second to Volk in that gym. So yeah, definitely keep your eye out for Justin Van Heerden. So these are just fighters I think are going to go to the UFC. I'm not necessarily saying all these guys go in there and be champions or anything crazy like that, but I do think we will see these guys make the UFC at the very least. They will get a fight in the UFC by next year. Like, I think a lot of these guys will get signed. So we'll see how well this ages. Maybe keep a tab on this, bookmark it or some shit. I don't know, but come back to this video in like a year, a year's time, and let's see how correct I am or how wrong I am. Who knows? I guess we'll find out. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.